Hello, my name is Sean Dry. I am a history faculty member at Oakland Community College, and in this video, I'm going to talk about what HyFlex course design is. HyFlex is an abbreviation for hybrid flexible, and this is a type of course design that's been around for a while, but it only started to become popular during the pandemic. That's when it began to get some really big attention, and that's when it came to my attention and when I started using it. The founder of the HyFlex approach is a guy named Brian Beatty, and in his book, he walks through these four basic pillars of the hybrid flexible or HyFlex approach. So the first one, the really big one, is the idea of learner choice. And as Beatty says, you want to provide meaningful alternative participation modes and enable your students to choose between what participation mode they want to utilize. So a few things about that. At the bottom there of the slide, I give you the definition of what a participation mode is. So at OCC, we'd be looking at the options of students coming face-to-face, students attending a class virtually in a synchronous way, like on a Zoom session, or doing their work asynchronously online. For us, it would probably be through D2L or something like that. So those are three participation modes that you could offer to your students, and your students would choose which participation mode they wanted to engage with. HyFlex is by definition very flexible. So you can decide as an instructor which, if any, of these three modes you want to make available to them. So for example, you could have a class where students could choose to either come in person to a physical classroom or come to that same class session synchronously online through a Zoom session. That would be one example of what HyFlex could look like. You could offer your students the face-to-face participation mode option or an online asynchronous option. So in that version of HyFlex, students would either come to class, to the class meeting, or they would do work asynchronously online, maybe through some work that they had to do and then submit to the D2L site. Or you could offer your students all three participation modes. The other aspect of learner choice that's in that definition there is, again, you as the instructor get to decide how frequently you are going to allow your students to choose these participation modes. So you could, if you have a class that meets once a week, you could tell your students, okay, for the first 3 weeks of the semester, you're going to have two participation modes to choose from, face-to-face or online synchronous. And then when we get into week 8 of the semester, for example, then you could say, okay, now I'm going to add an online asynchronous option. So you can decide, are your students going to pick every week which version they want to use? Are they going to is the course going to be divided into certain units? And in unit 1, they can pick from 2 participation modes. And then in unit 3, they could pick from 3 participation modes or go back to only 1. So as I'm saying, it's very flexible. Okay, so that's the big one. The big idea there is providing learner choice. And then these others are a little bit more basic. So second pillar is equivalency. It's very important in Beatty's version of the HyFlex approach to make sure that your students are going to have good learning outcomes in all of the participation modes that you're going to offer them. What this is basically saying is that you don't want to shortchange your students. If you're going to give them the choice to either attend in person or online synchronous, then it behooves you to make sure that their learning experience is going to be just as good whichever option that they choose. Number 3, a big pillar, is utilizing artifacts as learning objects for all of your students. So again, I provide you with a little definition there. Artifacts from learning activities, that's Beatty's way of saying just the stuff that you produce whenever you're doing your class. So it could be a recording that you take. It could be notes that you provide about your presentation. It could be some files that you generate and then share. So the idea here, reusability, make artifacts, make things, make recordings, make files, make documents that can be reused whatever participation mode your students are going to select. So if you know your students are going to be coming in person, you could provide them with a video to watch before they come to class, or that maybe you watch during class, but then that same video is going to be available for your online asynchronous students to utilize. So, and this really is meant to be of a help to the instructor, not having to do the same work multiple times. Don't create one thing for your face-to-face students and then create a totally different thing for your online asynchronous students. That just doubles or triples your workload. Instead, think about creating artifacts that you can use in multiple participation modes. And then finally, the idea of accessibility. We want to make sure that students are equipped with what they need to be able to equitably access all participation modes. This is something that is often out of our hands as instructors, right? This comes down to what sort of resources does the college provide? What sort of resources does the student have access to? But the idea is, as an instructor, try to do this as best as you can. So one example of this would be using OER, Open Education Resources. An example of an OER would be a reading that you create, perhaps a Google Doc that you create, which has a bunch of content in it. And then that Google Doc, that OER, is now equitably accessible by all of your students. You're not requiring your students to purchase a textbook or purchase materials that some may have access to while others don't, but it's something that they can all access equitably. Okay, so those are the 4 basic ideas of how you want to construct a course utilizing this HyFlex model. You want to give your students choice about what kinds of participation modes they're going to select. You want the quality of instruction and learning to be equivalent in all of the participation modes that you offer. You want to reuse materials as much as possible, and just keep in mind accessibility and equitable access as much as you possibly can. One final note, I added at the very bottom of the slide, when people talk about HyFlex, they often use the language of hybrid as well. So HyFlex and hybrid, depending upon the literature that you're reading, those terms can be interchangeable. I wanted to clarify for OCC people, when we use the word hybrid, we mean something very specific. A hybrid course at OCC may offer different participation modes, but we usually don't give our students a choice. So we may have a hybrid course, for example, that meets on Tuesdays for the first 3 weeks of the semester, and then for week 4, 5, and 6 of the semester, they're going to be doing online work. And then we'll come back in week 7 or 8 of the semester and come back to face-to-face classes. So that at OCC, that's what we call hybrid. We're not giving our students choice. We're telling them what they have to do at whatever point. HyFlex is giving students choice, is offering them several different participation modes and then letting them pick which mode they want to utilize. So I just wanted to clarify the difference between a HyFlex and OCC's definition of hybrid. If you'd like to learn more about HyFlex course design, how to build a HyFlex course and deliver a HyFlex course, here's a resource list that I've put together of articles and podcasts and websites that you can review and learn as much about this modality as you like. Thank you for your time and enjoy your HyFlex adventure.